So I get this question a lot. What roles work well or work best fractionally? Clearly not everything works, in fractional work versus full-time capacity. So what works well? And I'm going to start by going through some different engineering roles and take it from there. But let's start up top here with integration development. So in my experience, if you've watched any of my videos, you may have seen this, but this is where we started with hidden levers. Integration development, I would mark this as like, here I'm going to do check marks to make this easy. I'm going to give this, if I can get my marker to work, I'm going to give this 3 check marks, so this is like the best. Integration development, why does it work so well in a fractional environment? Well, because when you're dealing with APIs, when you're dealing with, even if it's file feeds, more old school integration, whatever that may be, when data is flowing back and forth. And so really, I call this integration, but I might also, maybe a more modern term for this oftentimes, or a similar related role, is data pipelines. So data pipeline engineering, this stuff, is similar. At any rate, anytime you're talking about data flows and working with different APIs and different data types, that works really well because the problem can be well defined for the person to work on. And so we found that to be true by having an engineer who was working against external APIs and connecting them back into our system. That was a consistent problem where consistent progress could be made. So that worked really well fractionally. They didn't need to be around, whether 24/7 or full time, for that to be an excellent experience. Full stack development. So full stack development, of course, that's a little trickier because you're talking about front end and then the application tier and then however you're storing or moving data on the back end. All of those aspects are there. Still works pretty well, provided that you're able to hand off like whole feature areas, whole pages, or whole parts of an application. That separation and kind of that workflow is needed, whether full-time or fractionally for that matter. I'm going to say that I'm going to give this 2 check marks. It really does work quite well. Is it as perfect as the integration use case? I would say it's as perfect, but it's still solid. Now, UI and front-end dev. In our experience, this worked well when folks were fractionally building components and parts of the application that could then get reused. That worked really well. It also worked well, as in the full stack dev case, if they're building parts of a screen or maybe building entire screens of your application, maybe if it's mobile app, even building potentially the whole thing with one caveat that's a little different. Sometimes there's an expectation from the business that, it's just a quick front end change, that happen in real time or close to real time and not happen as part of a sprint cycle. If you're trying to make changes at that velocity, well, then let's be honest, the fractional approach can interfere with that at times because the person isn't 100% available on your schedule. And so we do see success with this, but I'm going to give this 1 check mark instead of the multiple check marks of the other engineering areas, just because of that need sometimes for real-time quick UI changes at any time of day that hey, some firms expect that. On to QA automation. So this is another one where, you can set someone to the task of QA and QA automation, and to a good extent, the problem is self-defined. If they have access to the system, they can begin to write scripts that go through the workflows and operate, the user interface, or if it's API level testing, that hit those APIs. Of course, the QA engineer will need to have an understanding of what are appropriate outputs and what are the good outcomes. But once they have that knowledge, they can basically be off to the races. And so this was another area where we found excellent results and think it's an excellent fit for the fractional model. Finally, DevOps, in terms of just we're working through a whole range of engineering kind of roles here. DevOps is also, I'm going to give that 3 check marks. It tends to be the kind of role that doesn't even, particularly at startups, it doesn't get full-time capacity from anyone anyway. Usually it's a senior engineer or, technical leader who's just doing the infrastructure work for an organization up to a certain point. And as the organization gets larger, you cross over to, maybe we need somebody who's actually watching after this or formalizing our DevOps and our infrastructure and our CI/CD and really, managing that. But it's still not a full-time role. And so fractional capacity there is sort of a perfect fit. It's not, from what we've seen from organizations we've worked with at Fraction, it's not until you get past, sometimes in many cases, 100 employees. Maybe it's 50, maybe it's 100, but it's a larger scale. Then at that point, you're getting into the need of full-time DevOps. Quite often, fractional DevOps is all that you need. And frankly, at the smallest scale, we're seeing, when I say smallest scale, I'm still talking about firms that are over $1 million in ARR. We're really still seeing the needs in here, and one of the full-stack developers is kind of doing DevOps as a sideline versus this being a dedicated thing. But when it gets to that need, fractional DevOps is a great way to fill that without having to go all in. So that gives you some examples around engineering roles, and we'll talk about non-engineering roles next.